here.
Well, one of the key things was the leadership. There were two principals who served a total of 80 years together. The first was the lady whose father was German, and his father was German, and mother was she was a Puerto Rican or Cuban, and she became the first principal with a long era there. She served from 1874 to 1921, 45 years. And what she did during that time was she hired very good teachers for faculty. She had role models come and lecture to students. And when she left in 1921, and 3 years later, Mr. George Anderson Johnson, came to Howard, the principal, and he was there from 1924 to 1959, 35 years. So between those two, they had 80 years of service. And he again also received teachers who were very qualified from colleges like University of Pennsylvania, Howard University, and other places. And they brought also the great people who were role models, and there was great discipline, a lot of discipline. You just couldn't imagine what happened. In fact, Mr. Miller Naylor, they were talking about, graduated from Howard High School in 1920 and went to college at Lincoln University nearby, they called Oxford, Pennsylvania at that time. And when Mr. Johnson came to Howard in 1924, he made arrangements with a former principal at Howard to get Mr. Naylor to come back from the Philadelphia area and teach at Howard. He wanted him to be a coach because Howard didn't have any athletic system at that time. So Mr. Naylor, for 13 years, coached football, baseball, and to an extent basketball. And the white faculty members at the churches, at the schools, were being paid for their services, and he was getting no pay at all. He did that voluntarily because he had to. But Howard was a great institution. In fact, when Howard School started, here's how it started. It started in 1869 with the $5,000 donation of money, but Howard started as an elementary school because there was no black educational system for this African Americans, so they had to start from the first grade, kindergarten, first grade, and eventually they kept adding rooms to the school until you had all 13 grades right in the building. The African American men got very little education during that time because Wilmington was an agrarian area for the most part, and the boys had to work and harvest the fields, so the girls got most of the education during the school year. The guys would come in during the winter because it was too cold for to work at the fields. Right. And eventually, the school became overcrowded, and when they were there in the 1200 block of Orange Street, it was right next to the Clover Dairy, and right across from the Oddfellows Hall. The Oddfellows Hall was where African Americans had their dances and a lot of social activities. And when they jitterbugged and so forth, with the great musicians who came, they say the floor would just sway. And at that time also, the Shiloh Baptist Church was located at 12th and Orange Street, diagonally across from the Oddfellows. And eventually, during that time also, the girls played on the asphalt by the school, and the boys played in the streets. So when cars came, they had to get back on the sidewalk, and that was where the gym. We had no gym or anything like that. So that was some of the problems we had. Then eventually, the gentleman who Conrad School was named after, he would do evaluations of the black schools, and it was separate and unequal. He gave very derogatory reports about the status of the black schools. And what happened, Pierre Dupont II, who was born in 1870 and died around 1954, he presented money for approximately 89 schools for minority students. These were 1 and 2 room buildings. He also gave money for the white students also, but it finally got to a point where we needed more space at high schools and so forth. So what he did in 1927, he provided money, approximately $1 million, to build the Howard High School building. And though it said Howard High School, it had all 6 grades from 7th through 12th. But that was because there wasn't any space, so he had to have 6 grades there. There was only 1 gym at Howard, so the females stayed at Howard and had their gym classes. The fellas, during the inclement weather and during the winter, we had to walk up to the Warner Street Y, which was about 4 blocks away. So you had to go there and get back within 45 minutes and to reach your other class. And it was really something. But our teachers were very disciplined, and they made us be disciplined. And back in those days, corporal punishment was allowed. In fact, Mr. Johnson, he was a sort of small guy, but he could whip a paddle, and you respected him. They didn't take any stuff, so you just did well.
Now his son was just recognized.
Yeah.
Was it Fred?
Fred, the youngest son.
Fred Todd Johnson.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson was born in Shelby County, Tennessee in 1889, and his father, Lee Johnson, bought them. I think he was a slave. He bought his family to Bloomington, Indiana, and at one time he became the oldest resident of Bloomington, Indiana. In fact, Mr. Johnson attended Indiana University and graduated in 1915. He almost was a founder of the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, but what happened was he was going to college and he was working at night at an ore factory, and as a result, he wasn't there when the founders founded Kappa Alpha Psi, but he did become a member in 1815. I mean, in 1915. And he also, his 2 sons, George L. Johnson and Fred T. Johnson, they both became Kappas. And both of his sons were very excellent in track. In fact, Fred was a medley champion at Penn Relays in the 30s. And his brother went all over the country being a judge and attending track meets and so forth. And he retired from Howard in 1961 as track coach. And one of our former students, an alumnus of Howard, the late Quentin Sterling, he became the coach for 1962. And during that year, my youngest brother, who's deceased, Cortland, he was a member of the track team that won the 440 Relay of America Championship at Philadelphia at the Penn Relays. And Howard was the first school in Delaware to ever win that. And what they did, they gave you a very large plaque. Yes. And we have it down at the Howard School now, and we're very proud of it. Yeah.
That's the year I graduated in '61.
And at that time, when they did that, they won the record. The record then was 43 seconds. It's been passed now, but that was it. And then a couple years ago, I don't know if it was Pacoa or not, but one of the female schools, Catholic schools, they won a race equivalent to that. So there's only 2 high schools in the state of Delaware that have won those relay races. And what was happening also, they gave them gold watches, and to the best of my knowledge, 40-some years later, those watches are still operating.